And so now it's my pleasure to take us to the next step. So grab your water, grab your tea. We're going to be listening in on a discussion on the policy process. So again, remember the healthy food policy. It's a policy, right? And to get it to being implemented, it has to go through a process. And advocates really do use that process to strategically advocate. And so we're going to hear some more about that. And I'm going to actually turn it over to Samika, who is the advocacy officer at the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, specifically with the Global Health Advocacy Project. And so Samika, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce the session and to introduce our panelists. And so everyone, this is a safe space. We're hoping that it will be very engaging. So feel free to ask questions and the panel will try and take those up in conversation. Samika, over to you.
Thank you, Danielle. Morning, everyone. So I'm gonna lead this session with some of our experts in the field that have to actually deal with the policy process, and very much so, I think we should be doing some polls just to hear where you guys are in terms of understanding of what the policies are within each of our different islands within the region itself. And I just wanted us to take a look at what the policy process is. And of course, the policy process is a little bit different depending on which country you're in. And even though it does have different stages and different steps, it doesn't necessarily always go that way, depending on what is happening, depending on what is what's going on with politics, because all of us know politics is politics, no matter where you are. So we're gonna take a look at the policy process. But before we do that, we have a question, a poll question, which it should pop up and you should see it right now. And the question is asking, who should provide feedback on a drafted healthy food policy? So say, for example, if you do have a food policy or any policy for that matter that's happening out there, who do you think has the right? We did just speak about rights-based advocacy. Who do you think has the right to give their feedback on such a policy? So you can just go ahead, answer the poll so that we can have a discussion with relation to that. For example, we do have a policy that is very much being spoken about within the Caribbean region. I know it has been on the airwaves in Jamaica, and I know in Barbados it has been on the forefront as well, where we've been doing a number of consultations, and we have different groups that are taking part in that consultation. So we just want to make you a little bit more aware of who really has the right to chime in on that discussion with relation to the advancement of the policy, especially within that stage that it's in. So you can go ahead and answer the poll. I think it seems like most persons have answered. All right, so I'm taking a look at the poll right now, and the different groups that that we gave you was the youth, the government, persons with lived experience, and educators. And I'm seeing where most persons answer that persons with lived experience should provide feedback on the drafted healthy food policy. Well, if it is that you do look on the most recent policy that we do have in place, which is the school nutrition policy, you will see that we did have a number of consultations, and that was one with the youth. It was with the, like, for example, the principals and the vendors. It was also with the manufacturers. So it was with all the different stakeholders that do have a hand to play within the policy itself. So if you look at the school nutrition policy, obviously it's going to be everybody within the school environment. So the teachers, the principal, the students who themselves are going to be affected, which would be the youth. They did have a consultation with the parents as well. So anyone, so when you do say persons with the lived experience, technically yes, but everyone that should be affected by the policy itself, those are the individuals that have the right to actually participate in the feedback process of the policy. So we're just going to take a look at the different stages of the policy. Daniel, were you able to share that? So this is the policy process. And basically, so it's that long sheet there. Sharika and myself did a little bit of, well, Sharika did most of the designing. But we're just going to look at the different steps. And the first step is the concept paper. And the concept paper is just basically where there were discussions, like in the pre-planning stage, everybody was having a discussion about this issue being something that's topical. And then a concept paper is drafted by the ministries that have a part to play or it's of interest for them. And then after that, a policy is drafted and it outlines what the policy aims to do. And at that point in time, it's submitted to cabinet for approval. Now, at that point in time, Shanique is putting in a plug to message us for all your design needs. So after the policy is drafted now, then it comes out to the public for consultation, which is what we just spoke about. So anybody that has a part to play, once the policy is going to affect you in any way, shape, or form, for example, as I said with the school nutrition policy, then you do have a right to comment and give your feedback on the policy. So for example, the school nutrition policy, it has been drafted and it's on the Ministry of Education website, and everyone is able to access it and make a comment on it, whether by sending in a letter or making a comment on it. But you do have the right to make that feedback regarding the policy, looking at everything that's in there and what you think should be changed, what should be different. After we go through that consultation process, then it becomes a white paper. And once it becomes a white paper now, that's because all of the comments that have been collated, the ministry takes a look at it, the parliament takes a look at it to see if it makes sense, yes or no, through a consultant, and then they make the changes. And once those changes have been accepted, then it becomes an official policy, after which now it starts the implementation and you start doing the monitoring and evaluation. So a policy doesn't just happen overnight. As a matter of fact, the school nutrition policy has been many years into effect, but we're getting on the better side of things now. So it's just to let you guys know, when you hear these things happening out there, it's an opportune time for you as youth, especially if you know that it's an issue, a topical issue that affects you, whether personally or someone that you do know. It's within your right as a citizen, as someone that is a human being, to make comments and give feedback, because it's an issue that affects you. Now, with that said, we're gonna actually go in with the speakers, and as you'd have seen, we do have a number of different partners here today that will be just sharing their insights. We'll be sharing what the experience that we have as advocates with relation to the policy process. And our speakers will be Maisha Hutton, and she's the executive officer of Healthy Caribbean Coalition. We have Francine Charles, who is the program manager of the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados. We have Rosanna Pike, she's my colleague. We sit beside each other in the office, and she's the health education officer at the Heart Foundation of Jamaica. We have Sharika Mills, who I just told you did that beautiful design for the policy process, and she's the advocacy and policy officer of Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network. And last but not least, welcome Vanessa. We've been having these workshops. Welcome to the floor, who is the nutrition consultant of UNICEF Jamaica. All right, so we're just gonna go ahead. I mean, it's an open floor discussion. We're not necessarily saying, okay, one person speak, go ahead, but let's just start a little bit in order. But based on how I just introduced you guys, Maisha, just give us a little bit of insight on, you know, any policy that you've worked with, the whole process, and what the experience has been like, even the most recent one that we're working with now. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that you would recommend? What are some of the steps that you think give you a little bit more, you know, a place where you said, okay, I wish we really didn't have to go through that part, but as an advocate, we do know that this is what we have to do.
Thank you, Samika. So, you know, we were operate at a regional level, and we directly participate in policy processes, or our membership do. So we support either regionally or nationally. And I would say, just to reinforce what you said, you know, really kind of appreciating what the policy process is at your level, not only the formal policy process, but oftentimes we see that there's a deviation in actual practice, right? So it may be on paper written a certain way, but when applied, it deviates. So understanding the policy process, understanding, especially for youth, what are the existing kind of, and Danielle and I were talking about this last week, the existing mechanisms that exist that youth can leverage to influence the policy process. And in particular, we were talking about the youth parliaments. And so identifying individuals who are active young people who understand the national policy process, may have connections within the policymaking architecture, knowing the evidence behind what you're arguing for. You know, what's your advocacy? What is the evidence to support your position? In that early, in the early kind of conceptualization, agenda setting phase, it's really important that you not only understand who all of the actors are, but understand what the goals of your policy are. And I think right now, in terms of food policy, we across the region, advocates, are lucky because we're able to enter at the beginning, right? We are the ones in many instances driving these policy, driving these agendas. When we think about tobacco, for example, which has come before us, and we think about some of the cervical cancer work that, you know, specifically we've been doing with some of the entities, they've come after the fact, so they've missed that conceptualization stage. But some of the strategies that they have used to engage in that stage of agenda setting is really trying to lobby for themselves to sit on national committees. So for example, in Belize, the Belize Cancer Society pushed for themselves to be on the National Cervical Cancer Committee. And once they were on that committee and in the decision-making structure of the government, they were able then to say, these are the priorities, and this is how we should shape our national HPV vaccination policy. Similarly with tobacco, they were able to leverage relationships. And I think that's one of the beauties of our small settings. We often talk about the challenges with conflicts of interest in these types of policies with our small settings, but there are many advantages. Those small settings allow you to leverage relationships with individuals and really try to kind of use those avenues to influence policies even at the earlier stage. I'm going to stop now because I could talk on and on.
Of course, we can all relate. So I hear what you're saying, Maisha. You're basically saying that as advocates, whatever it is that we do stand for, we want to get ourselves in those spaces that will get us heard. So while we can, you know, talk with our little voices in our own corners, we have to get ourselves to a space where we can leverage what it is that we're saying. We can build a coalition, basically like what we do right now, where it's not just us, but other persons with like-minded interests that can speak louder for more persons to hear and actually join forces to make things happen. Thanks, Maisha. Francine, what about you, you know, as a program manager with the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados?
Yeah, so I think obviously Maisha laid a really good platform in terms of approaches and ensuring that you're being strategic about how you intersect with the national agenda. So for me, there were a couple of things that I would bring to the fore. For us here in Barbados, we are dealing with the SSB tax, as you know. FOPWL, we are supporting the regional process that's going on and supporting HCC, but also at the national level, looking at it as to whether or not Barbados can at least start the process for ourselves. And then, of course, the important school nutrition policy, which is right now the big thing. I would say there's 2 or 3 things that stuck out to me. I think if you've decided that you're going after a particular policy, in our case, we wanted to look at you know, food policy. How does that connect to the national agenda? How does that connect or resonate with people? And so for us, I think we connected our childhood obesity. And so we didn't stay with the wider food policy. We brought it down in a way or narrowed it or kept it at the childhood obesity prevention. But of course, tackling the same issue overall, because we felt that would have a very strong hook with people in general. So when we did our evidence, when we did our poll, I think in 2018, it showed that people felt strongly about obesity and they were concerned. But when we talked about, are you concerned about childhood obesity? I think we reached all the way up to 84%. So people care about children, and so that resonates. The other issue, the other thing we looked at was hooking it very strongly and accurately to the NCD issue. So the problems that obesity is causing at childhood is inextricably linked to a wider issue that now, even more than people, the government resonates with. They have a big NCD issue, a big NCD burden. So that thing connects. And I think that, to me, as young people analyze what makes our message resonate and strong. The second issue was the evidence. We have to have the evidence. And that, to me, interestingly enough, connects with different groups in different ways. So it connects with the policymakers because clearly they're hearing the issue, and now somebody knows the issue besides, maybe besides them, because I'm sure they knew the issues, but now the public knows the issue. The public doesn't just hear 1 in 3. The public hears, wait, we have a lot of problems with our children. So now that evidence turns into people at the public or civil society level. And so I think those are critical things. Have your evidence and know how to use your evidence in particular groups. And then the last one I would say is then, even more than what we call public support, is stakeholder support. And so the coalition that you spoke to, Jamaica, who are those groups, whether it be within the health sector or outside of the health sector, that this thing will resonate? It will resonate with mothers. It will resonate with women. It will resonate, and so you build and ensure that those groups have their support, whether it is to form a coalition or whether they simply will be influencers, or even just helping to continue to have the voice, that voice that's going public. And so I think I would stop at those 3 areas when I think about, approaches towards intersecting and beginning to move out into policy work. And I wanted to say from our experience that the young people, that youth leader group is critical, because the policymakers, it resonates when they hear, and we have found in our digital campaigns that we can actually track the timing of certain responses to those digital campaigns. So I would say that the mobilization of youth and seeing yourselves as particularly well poised, not to be used to advocate, but to advocate. Yeah, I think is really important.
Thank you so much, Francine. So what I hear you saying, and I know when it is that I was doing my master's in public health, and we had to talk about health promotion, they always said to reach for those low-hanging fruits, especially when you're dealing with public health. So you have to kind of kick them where it hurts. When you were younger and you're standing up in the line and they kick you in your knee back and they say, oh, you're hungry? Yes, that kind of thing. So you have to catch them right where they'll know that, listen, wake up. And we have realized, especially with a lot of our message testing, that once it is that you talk about the youth, it hits everybody everywhere. So yeah, it doesn't matter if I get sick and I fall down today, but if my child gets sick and something happens to them, then we do take a whole different perspective on that. So yes, definitely going with those low-hanging fruits. And that is why, as you said, not to just have the children to be used, but they really need to elevate themselves and be the voice for themselves as a right. And the evidence does make sense. Yeah, for some people it's the emotions, but when it comes on to the government, or even those governing bodies, not just the government itself, you really do have to stick it to them with the evidence. Okay, emotions are one thing, but they're talking about the dollars and cents. So evidence is important. They need to know the numbers, so the statistics. So when you start to say to them, okay, this percentage of your workers you're gonna lose this amount of money if these persons have NCDs, then it starts to click in their head. So you really have to hit that pain point for each different group. And of course, it's the coalition, always the coalition of the stakeholders. And I must say that we're a little bit jealous that you have the sugar sweetened beverage tax happening over there. Not even a little jealous. I see Rosanna's face lighting up over there. We're very jealous, and we're asking you to borrow your prime minister just for, just for a little bit, so that we can get our sugar sweetened beverage tax over here. But we must say that it is really a milestone for the nation, for the region, on a whole. I see you wanting to say something, Francine.
I want to say that we could make a fair exchange.
You want us to make an exchange?
Yeah, we could make an exchange for a few months, because we need Minister Tufton.
You need him over there. All right, let's get it in writing. Let's form a group and petition for the exchange. All right, so I'm gonna hand over to Rosanna. She's gonna tell you a little bit about our experience in the policy sector. We have a very different experience from Barbados, to be honest. So let's hear a little bit from you, Rosanna, as to our experience.
All right, thanks so much, Samika. So well, I hear, like, for Barbados, you guys have the sugar sweetened beverage tax, or SSB tax for short, implemented and everything, and we would love to have that, but sadly we're at, it's being stalled, especially with the recent announcement by our Minister of Finance that, hey, no new taxes, and he keeps reiterating that message every year in cabinet and parliamentary meetings. But what I can say is that our main components of, getting our messages out there are still trying to push for not just like the SSB tax policy, but also other healthy food policies like front of package warning labels, regulation of the marketing of unhealthy foods and beverages to children. We try to ensure that the three critical components are public sensitization, meetings with, key policymakers, and as well as the use of, mass media campaigns. So the whole public sensitization coupled with education or awareness through, outreach and dissemination of information to the public, just to highlight the health harms of overconsumption of sugar. In this case, say for the SSB tax, especially sugary drinks or, foods high in fat, salt, and sodium, right? So meeting with, ministers of finance, health, education, and agriculture, seeing that we know that intricate link of all of these areas. So we try to show them this link, between, say, for example, an SSB tax and its benefits and all these areas, and it being a progressive solution to tackling obesity and, to a further extent, non-communicable diseases, right? So for example, how revenues from a tax on sugary drinks can support farming or school gardens. That's where agriculture comes in, or school feeding programs under the Ministry of Education, or subsidies for healthcare or development, in health infrastructure under the Health Ministry, so forth. And what we try to use, as Francine mentioned, compelling evidence from other countries, and we try to stick to evidence from the region per se, to say, hey, we're not even looking at more developed countries, but from our region, that, countries that we're close, even if they're a little more advanced, but, we have compelling, scientific evidence on the efficacy of such a healthy food policy and how it can work, right? And we also want to touch a bit on, like, say, our advocacy messages, the whole multimedia or mass media component, in helping to boost awareness, right? So like getting coalition support from all our non-governmental organization partners, to help us to, hey, let's put pen to paper, write letters, and, put it to the government, to say, hey, we're all in support of this healthy food policy that we're putting forward. And as we always say, it's not like we're just coming up with this healthy food policy. You have it in the framework in a number of, you have it in the embedded in the framework of a number of other plans within your ministry, especially in the Ministry of Health and Education. So, hey, here's some evidence, what it can be, in that letter, and, the support from all these non-governmental organizations or civil society organizations, as well as, with the mass media component, while we're highlighting it to the public, sensitizing the public, we're also getting feedback from them. So pre and post campaign evaluation to say, hey, this is the results of our, campaign, to show that the Jamaican public, as consumers or as citizens, they understand the need for this and they are in full support should, you implement such a healthy food policy, and, the benefits from it, what it can, what can be done to advance the health of Jamaicans. Samika can probably chime in here because she can probably relate to some of these experiences.
All right, thank you, Rosanna. So as you can see, we're very much passionate about what it is that we do, and we're crunching down on time, but I just wanted to bring forward a point what Rosanna was saying. And even though as advocates, what we do need to realize is, even though we do have our policy priorities, and say, for example, a tax might be something that we're looking for, a policy might be something that we're looking for, depending on the political climate, we might not always be granted that. However, based on public education, we still will garner other things. Like, for example, we've garnered a paper to show us what one of our campaigns did for more education with relation to the sugar sweetened beverage campaign. The Jamaica Economic Panel did make note of what, advocating for a sugar sweetened beverage tax would do. And just like Maisha said, we do learn from previous policy experiences to give us an idea of what it is, what are the what do you call them now? Those key things that you do, those lessons learned that you can take over into to other actions that you do in the future. So we're gonna go pretty quick. We're gonna pass on to Sharika, about 2 minutes. Sharika, give us an idea as representing the youth. I'm so sorry to cut you short, but as representing the youth, give me an idea of what advocacy is like from your perspective.
Definitely. So yeah, I was really excited to hear Maisha mention, about the question that's just at the forefront right now about how do we keep young people involved in the space. And when we're at different stages of the policy process, what can we do as civil society? You know, that's always at the forefront of JYAN's mind. Like, what can we do as an organization to help young people to be more involved in whatever stage of the process? And so at first, when the policy was just, you know, a concept paper, like not really anything, but just some guidelines and, you know, objectives, you know, what they want to achieve. At that stage, we would have engaged student leader organizations like our National Secondary Students Council, you know, our Medical Students Association, our Nutrition and Dietetics Students Association, to just talk to them about what a nutrition policy for schools in Jamaica could look like. You know, we said, this is the issue that we have, you know, what are your thoughts on what this could look like and what our recommendations are, and what would you add to our recommendations? So at the point that we actually got to talk to the ministry about what we thought and, you know, what the school nutrition policy could look like in our context, it was informed by a large group of young people. And so we were able to bring their voices to that level. And then also when our policy came out as a green paper, you know, we took the opportunity too to say young people should not really have to read through this 50, 60-page document to be able to have some kind of input or feedback on it. So, you know, we went back and spoke to them again and we said, all right, we have a green paper now. In a short PowerPoint presentation, this is what it looks like. You know, what do you want to say about it? What are the things? And so we created a joint submission to the ministry with these other youth organizations to say, this is what they also think, because, you know, we would have already had that point of entry with them. So it's just constantly thinking about how can we bring them in? How can we get them involved without them having to even have the kind of technical expertise that we have, because they don't have to, you know, they are the persons that is going to affect. And if we have the expertise and we have that kind of knowledge, it's really about bringing them along with us. And so that's what's been really impactful for us.
Right. Thank you so much, Sharika. So this even brings us back to the points that Maisha, Francine, and Rosanna did say. You know, what happens is that all of these persons are out there that are being affected by the policy, but they don't even know that they have a voice. So us with the experience as advocates that are within the space need to, you know, we need to really just bring up our arms and go out there, bring them into the space, let them know that they have a voice. We just need to bring them in, help them with the technical assistance, and yes, Shanique, you, and let them know that they do have the power and they need to let their voices be heard, but we just need to facilitate them. Thank you so much, Sharika. Vanessa, last but not least.
Thank you, Tamika. Well, yeah, I'll be brief because a lot has already been said. Our advocacy really focuses on amplifying young people's voices and giving them platforms to speak, be engaged, and get information. That's really it. So I like what Sharika said in terms of the concept development of the food nutrition policy. We really weren't involved in that stage, but on other platforms, for example, we're reviewing our strategic plan for adolescent and pre-adolescent health. And what we're trying to do is have focus groups with young people on the effectiveness of the previous plan so that they can contribute to the updated planning. So that, you know, that kind of engagement is something that's really important because the plan is for them. Was it effective? Did it help? What can go into it? What services are needed? So that kind of pre-consultation is really important. In terms of the school nutrition policy, Sharika would have spoken to some of what we did as well. In terms of at the green paper stage, we facilitated the youth consultation to ensure that young people had the information about the policy process in a way that was more engaging for them. Sorry, my laptop just cut off. I don't know what's happening. Right, in a way that was more engaging for them. So having to read through how many pages of a policy that's just, you know, words and letters on a paper, it really wasn't feasible. So we did try to develop a user-friendly one-pager document, two-pager document to kind of give a brief synopsis on the policy, the process, and how young people can contribute. We plan to expand this a little bit for implementation as we now go into the schools to try to get them more involved in actually monitoring the policy. So they will know what's needed, know what should be in their school environment, and contribute to that process there. Also did some research is also important. So, the use of polls and social media to try to get voices across. So we use the U Report polls to show the Ministry of Education, hey, this is the support for your policy, or these are the challenges with your policy. And we got buy-in from them. In fact, they were very happy that JYAN was on board, that we were on board, and basically kind of endorsing JYAN's involvement in the entire process, which is also really important as we move forward. And let me talk about the next step. So when after the policy is amended, it will go to Cabinet as a white paper for approval, and then Parliament. Parliament is a place, and Cabinet is a place where it can actually revert to another stage. So I think advocacy there is really important. In the past, UNICEF has actually supported youth in Parliament, not youth parliamentarians, but youth in Parliament. So primary school students really got up and spoke about exploitation of children, sexual violence, and it really resonated with parliamentarians, parents, all of us. It was the first time that young people had ever done something like that. So I think in addition to the youth parliamentarians, just having young people speak and engaging the younger group as well. I mentioned this in another forum, because what we found is that we don't have to tell them anything. They know what is happening beyond what you think they know. I'm just saying, very astute, very conscious of what should be happening with them, and very willing to talk. So it's really important that we engage young people as well, and focus on youth in vulnerable areas, I think, and areas that don't get a lot of attention. So the rural area, for example, people may not have access to information. Yes, we can use social media, but a good portion of Jamaicans don't have access to internet. So, we have to look beyond our metropolitan areas and engage other youth. In terms of, in terms of youth advocates, I would say, in addition to what everyone else has said, Francine and Maisha, it's important to use the right channels to engage youth where they are, find your advocates in places where they normally go. So we have a teen hub facility in Jamaica at the Halfway Tree Transport Center, a very popular center where children and adolescents go in the afternoons after school, and they get homework help. They actually get HIV testing, sexual reproductive health, mental health counseling. But this is a space where you might be able to find advocates for your youth program, for some youth to go along with you, social media. But just find those spaces where young people are and try to garner your support and your group there. And I think also using different strategies to fit the context. So, in learning about advocacy, what was drilled into me is that not all advocacy is adversarial. So sometimes it calls for it, sometimes it's behind the door, sometimes it's with international organizations, but to fit the context is really important, because at the end of the day, it is about multi-sectoral collaboration, and trying to get into those spaces really requires thinking through the best way to do so. So I think that's also important, and reframing to more solutions-based advocacy. So yes, there's a problem, but these are solutions. This is what's being done in a different school that can help, or this is what is being done in Barbados that can help. This is what we want to see. There's a big problem, but more solutions-based. And then networking, showing up, I think is really important. The world is run by those who show up. So find those spaces that you really need to advocate in, identify organizations that you need to work with, build your group, not with just other youth advocates, but, as everyone else has been saying, other organizations that are working in this space, and don't be afraid to show up and bother them and say, this is what we want to do, this is what we feel. Even if they don't have it on their agenda, you can change agendas, right? You can show evidence and you can provide that kind of information to get them going in a particular direction. And a lot of what we do with youth is focus group work, research, because we need to hear from them to inform our programming. We don't program out of the blue. We need to know that we are meeting young people, meeting their needs and providing the resources. So
thank you so much, Mona. Thank you so much. As I keep saying, as advocates, we'll go on and on and on, because this is the core of what we do. It's not just our job, but it's the core of what we believe in. And you're right. We need to go out there. We need to make up noise. We need to go out there with our vuvuzelas and shake our pom-poms and say, hey, look at me. I'm right here. This is what I want. And that is why we want to involve you guys as the youth. You guys have the oomph, the energy. I'm not saying we're old and cold and we don't have the oomph and the energy, but you guys are the ones that are going to go out there and you're going to ask for what you want, because I believe we're in a generation like no other, where we have so many resources available to us to make things happen, and we really should not take that for granted. Maisha, I see your hand up. I'm gonna give you 30 seconds because I've got the time. I got the timestamp a long time ago, but I know everybody has something that they want to say. Go ahead, Maisha.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think against the background of what everyone has said, conflict of interest in the policy process from beginning to end. I think we have a unique awareness and appreciation. And one thing that I'm struck by repeatedly when I speak to people outside of our region is that we've almost taken the idea of multi-sectoral engagement to the level of multi-sectoral governance. And so these actors permeate all levels of the policy-making process. And we have a role and a duty to make sure that once we're in that process, that we hold the process to account and identify when we see conflicts of interest. And very often public sector actors want us to do that because they can't do it themselves. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to be aware of that and constantly making sure that there are checks and balances as it relates to COI. I'm done.
That's true. Because of the politics, they really can't say certain stuff. So because we are a little less held to that accountability, we are the ones that can go out there and light the fires, like literally. Thank you. I see some comments in the chat. I see where Daniel has been responding to persons. I mean, if at this point in time you have any questions for any of the panelists, feel free to ask them if it is that you want to put them in the messages and we address them later. No problem. But thank you so much to the panelists. You guys did not let me down any at all. And I'm going to move on over to Daniel for the next section of the program.
Thanks, Mika. I actually saw that Rajveer had a question, and so perhaps that can be our one question before we move on.
Yeah, that was the question pertaining to you were mentioning the grants that would be given to advocates. Like, could you elaborate on how that system works for me, please?
Yeah, so Roger, have no fear. That's something that we're going to address at the very end of the workshop. So stick around. Have no fear. We definitely will get back to that. Samika, panelists, thank you so very much. That was a fiery panel, and I think lots and lots of food for thought. I know we're tight on time, but Vanessa said it, and I think we got to quote it and make a quote card. Youth, you can change the agenda. You can change the agenda. Okay, so your engagement in this space is pivotal. And just some other little tidbits, thinking about how we can leverage existing structures, thinking about how we need to, when we're approaching policymakers, think of intersecting issues, things that are on the national agenda, make sure that our approaches are evidence-based, make sure that we have, again, think of our allies and have coalition support, a multi-sectoral collaboration, but not multi-sectoral governance, as Maisha mentioned. Make sure that we're making advocacy when we're engaging with youth accessible. So that two-pager from JYAN and UNICEF was critical in their school policy advocacy. And there are lots of other food for thought. I'm keen to hear what you really like. So please feel free to share in the chat and make some notes in your advocacy plan.